Somerville, and I'm Paul Famel with Natural Resources Canada and Canada's Adaptation Platform Coastal Management Working Group. Welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I have a few things to mention. Most of you are listening to the webinar directly through your computer speakers. However, if you run into any audio issues, you can call into the teleconference line. You can find the teleconference number and participant code in the top left corner under message from the host, or in the webinar reminder email sent earlier today. For those of you who did dial into the teleconference line, your lines will be automatically muted, and the reason for this is just to avoid any audio distractions or feedback during the webinar. We will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but that doesn't mean you have to hold off with your questions. You can pose them in the questions and comments section to the left of your screen throughout the presentation, and the presenters will answer them at the end of the webinar. I also want to mention that we are recording the webinar today, and we'll be sending out a copy of the recording to everyone who has registered for the webinar. Apart from that, if you run into any audio or technical issues during the webinar, please hover your mouse over Jacqueline Richards' name in the attendee list under host and click start private chat. Or you can also email her. Her email is listed in the chat box. So we have a great presentation today as part of our Adaptation Platform webinar series titled Helping Canadians Do the Right Thing, Green Shores for Shoreline Development. Today's webinar is hosted by Canada's Climate Change Adaptation Platform Coastal Management Working Group. The working group consists of representatives from federal, provincial, and territorial governments, academia, as well as professional and other organizations working to advance adaptation and increase resilience to climate change along Canada's coast. The working group is co-chaired by Natural Resources Canada and the Government of Prince Edward Island. The work being presented today was supported by a 2017 Adaptation Platform call for proposals under the theme Alternatives and Innovative Options to Harbor Protection Infrastructure Solutions. So we're lucky to have two great presenters today. DG is the Executive Director of the Stewardship Centre for BC and provides leadership and project management for delivery of stewardship projects and resources to audiences throughout BC. DG has been instrumental in the development and application of the Green Shores program. This is an incentive-based credit and rating system for minimizing the impacts of new shoreline development, as well as restoring the shoreline ecosystem function of previously developed sites. She has co-authored numerous publications on Green Shores, delivers Green Shores Level 1 and Level 2 training to communities in BC. She's a member of the Natural Resources Canada Coastal Management Working Group and manages the BC Green Shores Local Government Working Group, and provides overall technical expertise in project management for Green Shores in Canada. Jim Johansson is the Principal Engineering Geologist with Coastal Geological Services. Jim specializes in beach and estuarine process, coastal erosion mitigation, coastal restoration, and applied coastal management. He has designed over 150 implemented soft shore protection and beach and estuary restoration projects. Jim has worked as a professional consultant in Puget Sound since 1984 and started Coastal Geological Services in 1993. Jim led the team at Coastal Geological Services that completed the update of the Green Shores for Shoreline Development Guide that's being presented today. So without further delay, over to DG and Jim. Thanks so much for presenting.
Great, thanks very much, John. Today as John mentioned, we're going to be speaking about the update for Green Shores for Shoreline Development. So for those who are not familiar with the Stewardship Centre, we are a nonprofit organization and with the mission to strengthen ecological stewardship in British Columbia by providing educational, technical, and capacity programs and resources. We have a target audience of organizations, governments, private sector, and the general public, and we always work through collaborative partnerships. Green Shores is a keystone program of the Stewardship Center. So today, Jim and I will cover an introduction to the Green Shores program, including its rationale and components. We will go over the project objectives with the update to Green Shores guidance, making the update for Green Shores for Coastal Development, which was originally released in 2010, to the current guide, Green Shores for Shoreline Development. Jim's going to cover some key updates to credits as well as case studies. And then we'll talk about next steps for Green Shores, followed by Q&A. So we all know that there are some challenges with shoreline. And we also know that functioning lake and marine shorelines are vital to our most iconic species. We have situations where we have increased erosion. We put in structures that impede coastal processes. But probably the biggest issue, at least here in British Columbia, is the addition of hard armoring like seawalls and riprap. So how can Green Shores help? Basically, it's a rigorous standard based on the following guiding principles. The first is to preserve or restore shoreline physical process. We also want to maintain or enhance habitat function and diversity along the shore. We want to prevent or reduce pollutants from entering the aquatic environment. So we don't want to just concern ourselves with what happens at that interface between the water and the shoreline, but what happens upland, because we all know that water moves downhill. And finally, we want to avoid or reduce cumulative impact. So basically, the Green Shores team over the years have translated these 4 guiding principles into a series of credits to incentivize best practices that represent these guiding principles in shoreline projects. It's similar to LEED or Built Green credit and rating. So Green Shores is delivered in British Columbia with the core being the 2 credit and ratings guides, which is Green Shores for Shoreline Development, which we'll talk about more in the rest of the webinar, Green Shores for Homes, Green Shores for Local Government, Green Shores Training. We also have registration of accredited professionals, and finally we have certification for projects that meet the Green Shores standard. So I'll talk a little bit more about each of these aspects in the following slides. So Green Shores for Shoreline Development, it is based on the 4 Green Shores guiding principles, as I mentioned, translating principles into a series of credits. And basically the idea is this is a tool to help improve design and implementation of projects that can be completed in a shore-friendly way. It's applicable to larger scale projects such as parks, mixed-use residential, commercial, institutional shoreline properties, and marine and lake shoreline. It is not applicable to rivers and streams. There's 3 ratings levels: bronze, silver, and gold. Green Shores for Homes is, as it sounds, meant for residential properties. And again, the idea is to have recognizing the cumulative impact of the residential properties along shores, so that we want to encourage incremental improvements in each and every one of those. It is basically intended to meet freshwater and marine shorelines, and there's 2 ratings levels: Green Shores for Homes Chinook, or level 1, and Green Shores for Homes Orca, or level 2. And again, based on the 4 Green Shores guiding principles. The Green Shores for Local Government Working Group was established because we did a project that was looking to increase implementation of Green Shores in British Columbia. And what we heard from communities was that, one, they felt isolated working on these projects on their own, and they needed support, particularly around education. So we established the working group to deliver targeted delivery of educational workshops, the level 1 and level 2 workshops delivered at the community level. We also offer monthly peer-to-peer learning opportunities through teleconferences and webinars, and we also support Green Shores demonstration projects in the various communities. Green Shores training has been something that has really helped improve the implementation of Green Shores projects. We have 3 levels of training, and we have the introduction to Green Shores level 1. We have Green Shores Advanced, which is level 2, and currently under development, Green Shores level 3, where participants who complete level 3 will be approved for accredited Green Shores professional, and I'll speak to that in a few slides on. We established a collaborative relationship with post-secondary institutions, NBC, University of Victoria, as well as British Columbia Institute of Technology. And we find that delivering the courses through these post-secondary institutions really gives a lot of credibility to what we're delivering, and also makes it applicable for professional development credits. We currently have under development letters of understanding with St. Mary's University in Nova Scotia and University of Prince Edward Island, so that we'll be able to deliver Green Shores training in those provinces as well. We are currently on hold in terms of delivery of the field-based courses in BC and right across Canada, but hopefully we'll be able to begin delivery for the field-based courses early in the new year. There's currently an online option for Green Shores Level 1, and that is continuous entry, so you can register for that right away. Basically, the field-based courses are a combination of desktop exercises as well as getting out into the field and really looking at how we can design better projects through using the Green Shores Credit and Ratings Guide. So the certification process, this piece, basically is to encourage projects to enroll and then utilize the design guidance. And then we have a process where once the project has completed their enrollment form, completed their documentation, we have verifiers who can verify that the project indeed has met the standard and to receive the award. And that way we can ensure that the project really has met the standard, Green Shores, and we're very conscious of making sure that projects use the Green Shores name appropriately. Here's an example of Green Shores for Coastal Development. So this was completed prior to the update for Green Shores for coastal to Green Shores for Shoreline Development, and you can just see the difference in this is a park in British Columbia and Vancouver, and it achieved the Green Shores for Gold rating, and it basically did major habitat restoration in a project and was very, very successful. And then finally, I wanted to mention the Registry of Accredited Professionals. The idea here is that we want professionals to complete the suite of Green Shores training, level 1 through level 3, and then once they've completed that level 3 training, there'll be an AP listing on the website, and it provides the opportunity for project proponents to find professionals locally who can help them design a Green Shores project. And it's a win for professionals who'd like to do more of these projects, because then it connects them up with project proponents. So this project that we're going to speak more about in the coming slides really was about moving to update guidance to increase the application of the previously developed Green Shores for Coastal Development Guide, especially for sea level rise and climate change adaptation. We also wanted to make sure that the updated guidance was applicable to both the Pacific Coast as well as in the Maritime. We wanted to make it similar to Green Shores for Homes, which when it came out in 2015 was for both lakes and marine shorelines. So we wanted consistency with the Green Shores for the original Green Shores guidance, which came out in 2010. So we had wanted to add lakes. And then we wanted to add some case studies from both the Maritimes as well as BC. So the project process over the last 2 years really relied on a lot of input from technical advisory committee members on both the Atlantic and Pacific regions. We have key contractors, CBCL in the Atlantic, as well as Coastal Geological Surveys here in the Pacific Coast, who led the team. And really, I wanted to stress the review and input from multiple partners and organizations, as well as technical specialists on both coasts. You can see the list of primary reviewers, plus we had other reviewers as well. And certainly thank all these folks for their input to make sure that this guide was as good as it can be. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and he'll walk you through the key updates as well as an overview of case studies.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me. Jim Johannesen here. You can go ahead to the next slide. Excuse me, I can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so I'll be speaking to you from just south of Vancouver, BC. We're just across the border in the States. And you know, we oversaw and managed this update from the original document to the current Green Shores for Shoreline Development. I'm going to walk you through a few examples of the document here, but first, just a tiny bit more background. A couple of the key documents, DG mentioned the one on the right, but also the Marine Shoreline Design Guidelines. This was put together in 2014. My firm wrote this one for the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. And this was a long time in coming. It's part of a series of guidance documents peer-reviewed by 30-odd technical folks around the region. This is a series of documents that was the one they put off for a while because it was a fairly tricky one to write with our highly variable shorelines. So that had a whole lot of technical info we were able to draw on. DG also mentioned the Green Shores for Homes. So that was the 2015 document that was similar in scope to what we're doing with this document today, but of course it was scaled at a residential level. I was on the technical advisory committee for that. We had a very strong team, so some of those concepts were carried through to the current document. So in the current document, we've got a series of prerequisites and we've got a series of credits which make the meat of the document. The whole program is designed to be similar to the LEED rating system for buildings. So it's a whole series of principles and things that are instructed to be followed, and then there's points given for that. I'm seeing the comments. I'm trying to speak as loudly as I can. We had a little issue with the phone line. I'll try to speak as loudly as I can here. So this series of prerequisites are first, and as the definition of the word, required to get through the 5 of them. The prerequisites reflect the regulations across Canada, so they're in line with those. They are generally accepted environmental and best management practices, trying to keep every new development or redevelopment on track environmentally, and trying to steer specifically along coastal processes, shoreline processes for the geomorphology and the geology, which of course, provides the habitats and the maintenance of habitats. Trying to prohibit new impacts and, to the extent we can, restore for old impacts. So the series of the 5 prerequisites is here. I'm just going to go quickly into the first one in the next slide. And just so I want to mention these just quickly here. Siting, setbacks and siting is always a key part of shoreline development, keeping your impacts away from the immediate shore zone. Conservation of shoreline sediment processes, so of course we're referring to sand and gravel transport, sediment that is available for the shores to adapt and evolve. Conservation of critical or sensitive habitats, that's of course one of the other core items here is the physical habitat space, habitat quality. Prerequisite about riparian zone vegetation protection, which I'm not really going to talk about these last ones, and dealing with construction as well. Going forward, so the prerequisite 1, like I said, I wanted to touch on. We had 2 different tracks for people to abide by this prereq. One was for more erodible shorelines, such as in the left, bank or no bank sites, but ones that are generally not bedrock. We had another track. It was a little simpler and more straightforward for generally no or slow erosion sites, such as the one you see on your right. And then we developed a series of minimum setbacks for building and development from the shore, and these were based on shore type. So eroding high bluffs would have a larger shoreline than low bluffs, larger setback, and going down the line towards urban environments and armored environments at the very bottom of the line for minimum setbacks. And shoreline processes, just quickly on prerequisite 2 and 3. We're trying to conserve natural processes. That's been the big goal of a lot of these efforts in Washington State, Puget Sound, and it's the effort worldwide, I know, trying to allow habitats to maintain themselves to the greatest degree possible. So, physical processes on the left there being the building block, the maintenance queue for habitat formation and development. So we really have a separate prereq for these and then 2 separate credits for both processes and then habitats. So just a credit overview. I'm going to go through a few of these in detail for this part of the talk before we work towards wrapping up in a little bit. But this will be the meat of my part here is I'm going to go over a few of these credits. You can look at the list of all 10, and these were similar to the 2010 first edition. We've rearranged a few, we've dropped a couple and incorporated them into others. So we've tried to make this a very logical flow. We've added meat to the document. We've added a lot more description and clarification since the original edition. And, increased the number of points available on the right, you can see there. So it starts with what we think is a logical flow, conservation of the shore zone, siting, access to the beach or the shore, credit 2. Contaminated sites have their own little piece, so that's not applicable for everybody. And then we get into the physical processes in credit 4, the habitats in credit 5, specific riparian vegetation in credit 6. Stormwater was expanded greatly, climate change. And we've got one for innovation and exceptional performance there at the end. And strong encouragement and, of course, points for running workshops, field trips, online information, websites, the whole parts of outreach. Sorry, what did I do? That was PowerPoint or something. No. So Jackie, you might have to help me out here. You can see something different here.
I'm having a black screen here as well.
Okay.
We were told that Adobe's having some unprecedented usage right now.
Well, what I did was hit my space bar and it switched me out, as I would in PowerPoint. It switched me out of this. Let's see.
Can you see share your document at all?
Okay, here's this. My document. Yes.
Let me see if I can upload it again.
Sorry about that. This is a new format for me here. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Okay, I think that should be working for everybody. Let me, so I'm going to focus on credit 4 for a few minutes first, restoration enhancement of shoreline sediment and tidal processes. And then I'm going to switch to credit 8, climate change adaptation plan. Of course, one of the big topics today and in our future. These were significantly rewritten, expanded, as were a number of other credits. And these two in particular I'm not going to talk about today, about habitats and about stormwater. These were greatly expanded as well since the previous edition. So with credit 4, just give you a flavor of part of how this is organized is, what are the 3 things this credit focuses on is sediment source restoration. So in the West Coast and parts of the Atlantic Canada, we've got bluffs being a primary sediment source for our shorelines and our habitats. So the armor or the bulkhead removal is one of the targeted actions there. Removal of grinds, these cross-shore structures to allow littoral sediment transport to be restored. And in some highly modified areas, we're talking about potentially enhancement of sediment sources as well. Third major topic, removal of tidal flow barriers. So it's a picture on the lower right there, trying to open up road causeways that go in front of formerly tidal lagoons, for example. Enlarge crossings and openings from culverts to bridges, and removing structures from tidal. I'm not going to go into great detail on the points on that one. I'll give you a little more specific on how each credit works on the next one. But almost each credit has a case study that features the use of these. This is another new feature for this 2020 update. So I'm showing you sort of the hard to read version. This is how it looks in print. For this one, I'll zoom in on the next one in a few minutes. But the case study here, we're just trying to walk through some of the design elements, crediting the designers and the builders and the owners on the upper right of the first page, giving an overview of the site, history of the site, talk about implementation, and then just again, just the look of how this is. We've got a second page showing the habitat components that were exemplified through this project, stored sediment processes, ecological services that were then provided, as well as a few specific notes below. This particular project took a filled and altered area in the city of Vancouver, pulled the shoreline back significantly. As you can see on some of the photos, put a nourished beach in the place of a formerly industrial shoreline in the past. Okay, going forward, like I said, I'm going to give you a quick overview of this next case study, shoreline processes. So this is a lake case study, an example of a vertical, in this case, vinyl plastic bulkhead was starting to break apart and fail. This had cut the uplands off from the beach completely. It extended along this entire upper right photo between the arrows, small private monument. And this is a project I was familiar with. I was one of the designers. We removed this bulkhead, put a gravel beach in its place. This is one of the techniques we target in some of the potential solutions for interruptions of shoreline connectivity across shore. and sediment transport along shore. Like I said, I go through a little more detail on, oh, sorry, I forgot. This talks about some of the benefits and features of that specific project. Keep moving. A little more detail on credit 8, the one I'm going to focus on for how the document flows. Climate change adaptation plan. So each chapter, each credit chapter, all 10 have the intent. So we're trying to encourage planning and design, obviously, going forward for climate change and sea level rise. We tried to slip in graphics where we can, showing shoreline translation in this case, and what happens, when you don't move a house, when you don't site it, structure properly. Of course, you usually get to armor. So we're trying to give people the context of where this all fits in. There's, of course, more detail than this in the document. And we're trying to also say this is not a full-on technical design guidelines. This is trying to steer you in the right direction of things to consider and things to do, but we're not giving you the cookbook of how to do all those details. That's, of course, where the professionals come in. Again, this is not residential level. This is for larger projects. Going forward, so the next little section in each credit applies to, so we're talking about citing permanent structures, modifying permanent structures, and other structures around them. This chapter focuses on different adaptation approaches. So highest points are given. Of course, the most encouragement is given for completely avoiding the problem, allowing space for the shoreline to translate with a higher sea level. Retreat is given next highest number of points. We're actually pulling back from one or another type of shore configuration. Accommodate, lower level of points. We're elevating or otherwise accommodating to allow for the new regime. Protect or enhance would be the minimal amount of points, and we're not talking about shoreline armor. We're talking about building up a beach or a shoreline or wetland system or anything that's designed to protect. So we list a series of requirements for the applicant to go through to try to get the points to go for the gold level, the bronze or silver level, not in that order. So here we're talking about a 1 in 100 year water level, and we're talking about getting to a sea level rise of 2100 and planning for that. We do not give sea level rise projections today because we know that's an evolving field and a moving target. So we talk about best available science, and we leave that open going forward. It will update itself. Talk about documenting measures to, like I said, avoid, retreat, accommodate, or protect. I'm trying to speak as loudly as I can here. I'm not going to go through all of this, but again, for the submittals, I've just bolded some of the key words. We're asking for this credit that a letter template signed by a qualified professional. How did you get your basis of your shoreline? What is your sea level rise projections, trends for erosion, and so on? For lakes, we want to see all the change in water levels as well. We're asking for a full site plan showing the water lines and the boundaries, the elevations, and all. So that's all laid out in moderate level of detail. Points, as I mentioned, avoid or retreat are in the high end. And this is, the simple way you can find the points in each of the credits. And that's that same figure you saw, but we're really trying to give people the basic ways to go about getting at this in a conceptual sense, not in the actual every detail. So wrapping up here, just the case study of climate change. It's in the document, and these are pieces of that two-page study of Extracted. It's a site in Nova Scotia, the Belcher St. Marsh, Belcher Street Marsh, pardon me. I'm not going to read through all this. I think my time is running low, but this is trying to increase resiliency by removing a barrier, a dike, and trying to get to try to get the habitats restored. It's a managed realignment project. And looking forward into this one, this is the site plan that was given for the case study. See a whole series of actions. So again, I'm not going to walk through all this, but it's a great example of making room for sea level rise, making habitat restoration at the very same time. Finally, we've got a couple of references to other projects, such as this urban environment one. This is one in Bellingham, Washington, just across the border from BC and Vancouver. Contaminated site cleanup, as well as accommodating for sea level rise by removing the contaminants, removing the armor, removing some of the fill, building a beach designed for sea level rise. In this case, as it's turned into a public park. So parks are one of the target land uses for this document. So with that, I can turn that back over to DG.
Great, thanks very much, Jim. Sorry about the folks about the audio. Hopefully, we'll be able to catch up if you have questions to Jim. We can do that directly in the Q&A. So I'm just going to have a few minutes talking about what the next steps, and I always like to think that we'll have the smooth focus moving ahead from one stepping stone to the other. But I think a lot of times when you're implementing a program such as Green Shores, it's a little bit more like the diagram on the right, and you go some forward and some sideways. So we'll talk about what the plan is. So now that we've updated the Green Shores for Shoreline Development, and it is applicable to the Maritimes as well as the Pacific Coast and lakes and marine shores, the next step is going to be to update the Green Shores for Homes credit and rating guide, so it'll be applicable to both the Maritimes and British Columbia. And right now we're working on building some partnerships to get this guide updated so that we'll have both credit and ratings guides applicable for the Atlantic and the Pacific. So we have a target of 2023, and if anybody has any pots of project funding, we're certainly always interested in speaking with you about that. So we're hoping to move forward with that in the coming months and years. The next is another part of the current, the NRCan funding that John had mentioned earlier with the Coastal Management Working Group. And we contracted ESSA Technologies to do a triple bottom line evaluation of Green Shores in British Columbia, and also look to get some input in terms of laying out a roadmap for Green Shores implementation into the future. And they met with both Atlantic stakeholders and stakeholders here in BC. And certainly we have a lot of enthusiasm from the Atlantic stakeholders about the prospect of extending Green Shores into the region. So they basically, the steps that were laid out for us was really going back to make sure that we ground truth the theory of change for Green Shores, making sure that as we roll it out from just a BC program to something that can be applied more broadly, we need to ensure that we have in place and we're really clear about what we want to do for moving ahead. So we need to do some ground truthing. We need to develop further capacity of the Stewardship Center, as well as identify and develop capacity of an organization in the Maritime for implementation. As you saw in my earlier slides, there's a lot of pieces that have to fit together to enable Green Shores to move ahead. And so we need to have organizational capacity there, both in British Columbia and as we roll it out in other provinces. And this third step is probably the real big one. And I saw some comments about incentives and questions about incentives. And I think those are the sorts of things we need to put in place, some enablers, so that Green Shores can be deployed and adopted. And so we need to overall increase awareness and education about Green Shores and how it can be applied. We need to increase Green Shores demonstration projects because we do know that people want to see what it looks like. And when we're at the front edge of the curve here, sometimes it's not really clear what does a project actually look like that has those guiding principles throughout the project. We also need to increase training for professionals, and we need to address regulatory barriers to moving things forward. So those are the key parts of the roadmap, and part of that also, and addressing regulatory barriers and offering incentives is they also go hand in hand. So in terms of moving ahead, there are some options for you all to get involved. Certainly to take Green Shores training. So currently we do offer the online introduction to Green Shores through British BCIT. And we will be offering the field-based courses as soon as we're able through UVic, St. Mary's, and UPEI. And certainly we'd love to hear from you if you or your organization is interested in learning more or participating in next steps. There are a lot of resources on our website to learn more. If you go to the Stewardship Center website there and click on the Green Shores program drop-down menu there, you can get to the Green Shores, all the Green Shores pages. And on those pages, there are links for registration to current training, like the BCIT online training that's available, as well as all our past webinars are up there as well. And there are PDFs of all the guidance documents, so you can download a PDF of the Green Shores for Shoreline Development, Green Shores for Home, and lots of other resources are available. I do want to mention that we are going to be having a webinar which will dive into more specifics of if this has wet your whistle and piqued your interest in finding out a little bit more about what key, diving in more to the key changes and the fact that we moved the Green Shores for Coastal Development 2010 guide from, I believe it was 62 pages, and our current Green Shores for Shoreline Development is coming in at 114 pages. So there's a lot of content that's there that we didn't have time to go into in this webinar. And if you go to our Stewardship Center website and click on the webinars, you can sign up for that free webinar that's coming up 2 weeks from today about the same time. So that's something which you can register for. And with that, I will say thank you. And here are our contact information for both Jim and myself. And I certainly want to extend a big thank you to Natural Resources Canada for supporting the process and the work of this project to update the Green Shores guidance material, and especially to all our partners on both coasts who really provided a lot of in-kind support for Green Shores in this update. So I think with that, we'll turn it over to some Q&A.
Thank you, DG and Jim, and apologies to Jim and the audience today about the audio difficulties, but I think we should jump into some questions now. That's some good ones. I guess you kind of addressed this, DG, but what would you say Green Shore property owners get from participating in the program? What do they get out of it? And can existing projects be certified even if they weren't designed with Green Shores in mind?
Great question, and that always leads to it's a question that often comes up, and I think because, as I mentioned, we are in the relatively early stages of Green Shores in the certification process. It's the early adopters generally do it for the satisfaction of knowing that they want to. They're demonstrating their leadership in terms of shoreline sustainability, habitat restoration. So they have verified projects. So, for example, in the Green Shores project that I highlighted in the earlier slides, the new Brighton Park project, that was a Port of Vancouver and Vancouver Parks Board collaborative project, and they utilized their rating by highlighting it to the media and just demonstrating leadership in terms of sustainability. So there's the media interest, and there's the basically walking the talk, and it's actually verified that that organization, those organizations are walking the talk, and it's verified. So that's from the larger scale projects. It's certainly that is something that is a benefit, and similar to getting a LEED Platinum building. So that is something that we're working on in terms of a direct linkage between an incentive for getting through regulatory barriers. And although we don't have a direct link right now, the language in the credit and ratings guide is specific enough so that if a jurisdiction wanted to link and utilize that wording, then they can do that. And that way a project proponent is very clear on what that jurisdiction wants, and it's linked to it. So it's not directly linked to an incentive. So that may happen in the future, but that still remains to be seen. So I think I answered that question, John. There were two parts to it, and I'm not sure I got to the second part. So.
No, that was great. Yeah, sorry for bunching those up. The second question was, for existing projects that have been completed, can they go for a Green Shores credit?
Yes, they can, though it is depending on when the project was completed. It's generally better, and the credit and ratings guides are intended to help guide better design, and then through the certification process to be able to document that design has been completed and it can be verified. So the ideal scenario is to use this credit and ratings guide to guide project design and construction. So however, you can go back depending on how robust your documentation is. Then you can go back and do it retroactively, and so that is possible. It tends to be more work because you have to go back and source out the various documentation. However, it's certainly possible to do it, and certainly would be interested in doing that. But as I say, the intention is to use it as design guidance. Is the preferred method.
And we have another question that ties in with the first. How does the credit system tie in with the permitting process? If they receive a certain number of credits from Green Shores, are they pre-certified or expedited for their permitting?
That's very much in process right now, and that it would be in British Columbia. What we have is a number of jurisdictions who've actually taken Green Shores particular credits or referred to Green Shores in their official community plans and development permit areas. So it okay, this is what we want to see from those jurisdictions. But we do not have an expedited permitting process in British Columbia at present. We are currently in discussion and working with the province of BC for certain aspects that would be consistent with green shores. So there is not something that is specific yet, but it's something that we've heard about, that it's a really good idea to do, and certainly it would be something that we would be more than happy to work with various jurisdictions to pilot that approach. I mean, we've got the technical language in the credit and ratings guides, and so it seems like a natural fit. But I think that's definitely a next step that we would be looking to move towards, and working with partners to do that.
We have a few more questions or minutes if anyone has questions they want to send in now. I do have a question for you, DG. What was the biggest challenge of adapting green shores for the Atlantic coast, or a couple challenges?
Yeah, I think I will start, and then I'll let Jim jump in on this as well, because there's certainly probably a big challenge from a process-wise was to make sure that we had enough technical advisors on both coasts, and so that was something that we worked very hard to engage with partners and technical specialists in the Atlantic provinces. And then from a technical point of view, I'll pass that over to Jim if Jim can jump back on here.
Yes. Thanks, DG. Yeah, well, Canada is a very varied shoreline. The real challenge was trying to make this applicable for, the very large variety of shoreline types, as well as, I'm speaking marine originally, but as well as lakes. Quite a variety of even the lakes, from the very, very large to some of the very small. Alpine versus, low elevation lush. Still a larger focus on the marine shores, though, as that's the majority of, I believe, this will be used for. When we talk about some of the Atlantic coasts, obviously we've got, full-on exposure to the North Atlantic, and we've also got primary target areas being slightly more protected, estuarine areas and bays, ones that are allow for a greater variety of shore treatments to be applied. So that was really the biggest issue, is getting all of those, getting things to work for all of the different types of shores. We had a little bit of help from CBCL in the Atlantics, and DG was very helpful at recruiting, as she said, a large number of technical experts to review certain parts of the document. But I'll leave it at that. I'm not sure if you had anything else, John or others.
No, thanks, Jim. And we do have a couple minutes if there are more questions. For the training program through the university, is that do you have to enroll through the level 1 first? But can anyone sign up for Green Shores training?
Yes, anyone can sign up for Green Shores training. And so the introduction to Green Shores training is intended to be basically that, an introduction to, what Green Shores is all about. We have a number of shoreline property owners who take the training when we deliver it in the field in our working group communities. So a lot of times we have half shoreline property owners, and really find that being able to go and walk their shore, learn about the Green Shores principles and how they can look at their shoreline a little differently, and instead of going to the go-to, I'm having shoreline erosion, I need to put in I need to put in a seawall, to being able to look at, okay, what are the different options? You know, would a soft shore hybrid approach work here? That sort of thing. So introduction to green shores is really a starting point. And then what we've done is made the green shores training sequential, so that the introduction to green shores really lays the foundation, and then the green shores level 2, green shores advanced, is a 2-day training where we spend time both in the field and doing desktop exercises. Primarily, the folks who take the level 2 training are working in some aspect of green shores. They're coastal engineers, they're landscape architects, biologists, planners, etc., working at either in the private sector or with governments or NGOs, and they're wanting to do projects and utilize the credit and rating systems to do better projects, or they're working with shoreline property owners and who want to encourage utilizing the green shores. So those are the two that are existing, and the online course the online course is meant to be our intention was to translate our original BC field-based course to something that people could take online right across the country. And so we did our best to make the language such that it is applicable to the Maritimes as well as the Pacific coast. And certainly we will be updating that as we get feedback to see whether we've done a good job and relating it to both coasts. And I have to say, when I took it, because I'm one of the instructors for the field-based courses, when we were translating it to an online, I thought, okay, how is this really going to work? But it's really quite clever. And they used a drone and got some photography, and they set it up to do these courses, and there's a lot of videos. So we've had very, very positive feedback about the online level 1 course. So I would encourage folks to give it a try. And the other part is the Green Shores level 3 training, which we will be piloting this coming August and September, and our aim is to have it ready to go for October. So, and it will also be an online, portfolio-based course, so that we can get this accredited professionals up on the website and connecting project proponents with folks who can help build better projects.
And DG, do you think you can, in 60 seconds, say what the certification fees are involved?
Certification fees? Yes. So there are certification fees for Green Shores for Shoreline Development, and there's an enrollment fee and then a verification fee, and those currently stand at about $3,500 per project.
Well, thanks DG and Jim, and thanks for our audience for participating today. It was a great webinar, and we have some links up here now to the Adaptation Platform website, our email address, as well as a link to upcoming and past recorded webinars. And Jackie posted a survey link in the question and comment thread that you can fill out at your leisure. Thanks for participating today, and have a great rest of your afternoon.